Crater Caper. I was 13 years old when my mother, my grandmother, and I spent 2 days at Crater Lake National Park in southern Oregon. We had rooms at the historic old lodge perched right on the rim, closed most of the year by heavy snow and impassable roads. It was in the height of summer, a place of warm sun and clear blue sky, which nonetheless paled by comparison with the unbelievable deep, rich blue of the lake itself. Formed eons ago when the volcano named Mount Mazama literally blew its top. The lake is renowned for its color, caused by depths of more than a mile. After breakfast on the morning of our scheduled departure, I set off alone for a brief walk along the rim. Once again, I was fascinated by how far below me the lake's surface was located. 1,000 feet of exceedingly steep walls, created at the moment the eruption occurred. I knew that on the far side, perhaps 7 or 8 miles by road, there was a trail for tourists to descend. We had not done that because of grandmother's age. Suddenly, I was overcome by an irresistible compulsion. I must dip my hand into the water. Without a second's pause, I began heading down the crater's side, slipping and stumbling at first, then more quickly bounding and leaping as I discovered that was the only way to stay on my feet. How exhilarating it felt. Down, down, down I plunged. My feet had never felt so sure. I had never felt so daring, so alive. Clearly, there was no turning back. It would not have been possible. Even with the great speed I was making, it took a number of minutes to reach the bottom. Once there, I moved forward to the water's edge, knelt, and ladled handsful of the frigid water onto my head and shoulders. It was a sort of celebration of the lake's great age and of my own unseasoned youth. Fully satisfied, I turned back to the crater wall and began to assess my return. With a shock, I became newly aware of my true location. On my trip down, I had given little heed to the steepness of the walls. It had only added to the thrill. Now, as I made tentative beginnings of the climb back, I realized that, in fact, the wall was nearly vertical. Much of its surface consisted of loose shale, on which my sneaker-clad feet slipped precariously. After several futile attempts, I stood once again at the lake shore. I could not climb back up. There was no choice but to travel along the lake's edge, hoping to find a portion of the crater wall which was more climbable. I soon reached a point at which the wall rose directly out of the water in a huge rock. I had to swim in the lake for 30 or 40 yards before I could get around it and walk again. I was forced to repeat this several times, my heart pounding each time in fear, because I could barely swim. This was becoming not the kind of adventure suited to a small, scrawny, bespectacled bookworm. About noon, I reached a point from which the wall appeared more user-friendly. I gazed up toward the top nearly overwhelmed by how far it seemed. Huge trees looked like tiny specks, but there had been no sign of any other person down where I had spent the morning. I knew I had to climb back out. I was already very tired, but I didn't let myself think about that. And so I began to pull myself upward, sometimes upright, but most often having to go on hands and knees to keep from falling backward. I had to stop for rest every 30 or 40 minutes. The day was very hot. I longed for a drink of water. I didn't let myself think about my progress. It seemed as though every time I looked up, the rim was no closer. The trees were still tiny specks. All I could do was climb and crawl, hour after hour. The shadows had grown long. The air was turning cool. Then, amazingly, I was there. I was at the top and very near the lodge. I heard voices approaching. Several young people I recognized as lodge employees ran to me. They were excited. "We found him!" they shouted back to the others, who also came running. I soon learned that I had been the object of an all-day, four-alarm search and rescue effort, which had failed because no one could imagine I would go where I had. Mother and grandmother were so relieved they didn't even have it in them to be angry. There was, as it turned out, an unexpected bonus. Every one of the teenage girls with summer jobs at the lodge seemed to make a point of encountering me. "You're the boy who went over the rim and down to the lake, aren't you? You were so brave." Grandmother overheard one of them. She was kind enough not to speak. She didn't need to. Her look was enough.